Hi, this is Chenxi Wang. Good morning, and thank you, Project Discovery, for inviting me to speak at the Partly Strictly Security. I think I did that well. It's a tongue twister for sure. So Chenxi Wang here. I'm the founder and general partner of Rain Capital. We are an early stage venture fund based in Silicon Valley. We invest in cybersecurity, AI, and infrastructure projects. I am very happy to be an early investor in Project Discovery and have seen the growth and trajectory of the company. Very impressed with everything that you're doing, and also honored to speak today. Obviously, Project Discovery is an open source based company. And there are many other open source security solutions out there that have made their way into different organizations. And we've been watching this trend very closely because it represents a shift in security industry. I spent about 20 years in security and have seen essentially, when this industry was in its infancy, you buy Symantec or McAfee on the endpoint, and you buy Checkpoint or Cisco on the network, and you call that a day, right? You don't need anything else, and it's all commercial off-the-shelf products. Today, it's different. A large organization would have 60 to 100 or maybe even over 100 different security products. And by and large, these products don't necessarily let you look underneath the hood, right? So if you're a security team, you need to integrate one product and another one to customize certain things. Sometimes it's difficult. And we've seen this in the last 10 years or so. People start to look at open source alternatives to commercial solutions to meet certain functionality requirement within their organization. And security is actually, cybersecurity is one of the, I would say, a little bit lagging behind in terms of adopting open source in enterprise. But now we're seeing it. Functionality like Project Discovery, like SemGrep, like many of the others have made their way into the hands of security practitioners. And because of that, Andrew Smith, my partner, and I, my business partner and I, have made this open source security index. This is a free resource for everybody. So if you go to open source securityindex.io, I think, that you'll see the top 100 GitHub projects on security. That is. So we made a model basically to assess the ranking, relative rankings of these projects. So the things like, how many contributors are active on this project, and how many stars we have, and how many releases that the project has done in the last, 6 months or so. And all these go into a weighted model, which helps us decide who is, sort of in the top 100. And we are very happy to see that, and this index has becoming more and more popular amongst the practitioners. A lot of security engineers and security orgs been hitting the index website and looking at maybe new emerging things that come up that they should be aware of. So for instance, we've had recently open source AI security projects that have been rising very fast on the index. They haven't made it into the top 10, but it's came from nowhere and suddenly made to the top 70 and it's inching into top 50. When we see that kind of momentum, we can understand where the industry is looking at, right? So I want to talk a little bit about why we think open source security is such a fascinating concept, right? In the past, again, I talked about commercial products were the norm, and still today, commercial products are by and large what people spend budget on. But if you think about folks like the FANG companies, right? The Meta used to be Facebook and Google and Alphabet, these companies, they have a large amount of engineering resource, and the engineers there wanted to be creative, wanted to engineer, right? Not just use, but they want to engineer. And the best way to engineer a solution is not to write code from scratch. And you can if you want to, but it's not the most productive approach. The more efficient approach is to look out there to see if there's any open source packages you can leverage. And that has been a force multiplier, if you will, for many engineering organizations. I download a package that affords certain core functionality I want, and then because it's open source, so I know all the code in there, and I can build on top. Or even better, maybe I'm an open source contributor already to this library, and so I really understand, the functionality from inside out, and then I can contribute it in a way that it will help me solve my problems. And we see that a lot. And I remember it was 2 years ago, I was at RSA conference, which is one of the biggest cybersecurity conference, and I was in an event with a lot of practitioners, and one AppSec lead, he and I were talking over dinner, and he said, I can tell you that ProjectDiscovery is going to change the world. I'm like, really? Why? Tell me. He said, because how easy it is to deploy, and I just go to the open source distribution page and I download it, and I can start seeing results right away, and also how much it shortens the time takes to triage, to validate a certain vulnerability is true, right? And also I heard that one of the latest CISO surveys, I think is by Cloud Security Alliance, the top challenge that CISOs point to is they have too many vulnerabilities to deal with, to the degree that it has become a noise, right? So if you have, everybody's like coming at you, say vulnerability, you're like, I'm just not going to deal with that, right? And that, in the end, obviously is problematic for everybody. It could be a critical vulnerability not dealt with, an application that should be patched, not patched. We don't want that, right? That's not a great outcome for anyone. What ProjectDiscovery does, and you can see it in the open source functionality, is it helps you zero in on the ones that are truly exploitable, because it tests the exploit along with the vulnerability findings, and that was one of the reasons I was so blown away by the open source version of the solution here. So when a company that is experimenting with different open source security solutions, they can get their hands on the software free. I think there's the risk you take on is maybe the time to experiment as opposed to monetary or any other risks. So with that, you can have a little bit of freedom to say, hey, how I want to deploy this and how I want to customize it. And obviously customization is a big thing. it does come with a little bit of effort, meaning that and a lot of the open source products or open source projects rather has the core functionality built, but may not have the bells and whistles that enterprise practitioners would want, right? So, for instance, you may not have a nice looking console, may not have single sign-on, and all these things are you may find in the commercial version of this product. But if you start with the open source version, then you understand how to work with the product and potentially assess with the commercial version would be the right fit for you guys. So by working on this open source security index project, that we're kind of blown away by how many fantastic security open source projects are out there. And I didn't know, in fact, before I started looking at building this index, is that I knew there were lots, but I didn't know so many of them out there. And I think it's still the number one. I'm looking at the index right now. The number one was Metasploit, which is pretty, I wouldn't say old, but it's been there for a while, right? And the reason that it's so popular is it's still, in terms of vulnerability management, is one of the earliest ones that help you to scan your resources. And actually, it has now dropped to number two. Metasploit is number two, and Rust, a really fast Python linter, is now number one. And that's also very interesting. I think a few months ago, we do monthly publication of new things we found on the top 100 index. I think 2 months ago, we wrote about Rust has really risen in the ranks. And the reason, because Rust is a Python linter, right? And the reason it has become more and more popular is that Python as a language has really been adopted as the AI language. And as more and more organizations and individuals are writing AI applications, there are more and more Python code out there, right? And because of that, we have more demand for Python security. So, and Rust is always been touted as a very speedy linter, meaning scanner, right? So that is one of the reasons that has come up, risen in the ranks really fast. And now, in the span of less than 6 months, it has come up to the top, number one on the open source security index.io. It's super impressive. So the momentum, and that tells us what kind of applications are being used by the industry, and hence what aspect of security is important to folks, right? So we expect that any security functionality to do with AI, securing AI, or helping AI applications deal with security is going to be very popular, more and more popular in the near future, that is. So one of the things that we also hoping to achieve with this open source security index is that to not only give the industry a free resource to look at what are the popular projects that being deployed, but also as a guide for innovators, for engineers who want to create something to see, hey, are there any gaps in the top 100 security, open source security projects? Maybe in my own work that I found it's really useful to have function X, but I cannot find function X on the top 50, top 100 index. Maybe I should write one myself, right? And that is, I think that is how ProjectDiscovery came to existence. And because Rishi and Sandeep and folks like them are kind of really needed that functionality in their own work to say, how do I reduce the amount of work I need to do to process all the vulnerabilities? And so they built nuclei templates, and which then they open sourced, and the rest is history, right? So we encourage anyone who has the passion to build, has the realization that there's a certain gap in the industry can be filled, build something, put it out on GitHub, on other open source platforms, and we'll track you. And hopefully that you'll see that you're being adopted, and people are using you, and you can come up on our open source security index. So I am just going to stop here today because I'm really here to talk about the open source security index, and we are very thrilled to see more and more open source security projects emerging, not only on the index, but on the various platforms. And so Hugging Face, for instance, is one we started tracking in addition to GitHub on, open source AI models to the extent that is relevant for security. So thank you all for listening, for coming to the Heartily Strictly Security Conference. And thank you, ProjectDiscovery, for having me. And kudos to all the great work.